All right, I'm gonna make you guys a little video that goes over our list of key terms. So this was made for like the computer part. Computer part's like 40 some questions. And the hardest part about this test is the time. You gotta get it done in an hour and a half. And there's two parts. There's a computer part, and then there's a lab practical. We're gonna walk around with a clipboard, 4 different versions. So you're gonna want to know your stuff. So don't listen to what if you're in seventh period. Don't listen to what fifth period said because they might have a different version than what you're going to get. So anyway, so this is for the computer part. Lab practical, definitely know the parts of the brain for like the dissection. I'm going to go over that here in a little bit. All right, number one, function of the pons. So I was looking at an old test when I made this list. These are going to be on the test, the computer part. Function of the pons. Remember, it has to do with breathing. It has to do with the depth of inhalation, depth of your breathing. Function of the corpus callosum. Remember, that is the white matter. There's a commissure that connects the right and left cerebral hemispheres. It allows both hemispheres to talk to each other. Number 3, blood supply to the brain. All right, so remember the blood needs a constant supply of glucose because it does not store glucose. So blood is cut off from the brain. It doesn't get that glucose. It can't make energy. Sodium, potassium pumps quit working. So it needs a constant supply of glucose. Let's see. There's structures on the capillaries that only allow certain materials to go through. Remember, that was made by the astrocytes that forms the blood-brain barrier. Let's see. Remember, if blood flow is lacking, that'll cause not enough oxygen to get to the blood, which can cause lysosomes to burst, releasing their digestive enzymes on the brain, which is obviously not good. Remember that blood is supplied mainly by this arrangement of blood vessels called the circle of Willis. It's on the ventral or bottom side of the brain, and it forms kind of like a circle, so they call it the circle of Willis. Remember, things that cannot easily pass through the blood-brain barrier, things like red blood cells, they don't get in. Vitamins can't get in. Toxins can't get in, and most antibiotics cannot pass through the blood-brain barrier. For the diencephalon, remember the diencephalon is made up of the thalamus and the hypothalamus. That's it. Diencephalon, thalamus, hypothalamus. The amygdala, remember that's for like fear and anxiety. It also helps to store highly emotional memories. So memories that are highly emotional, the amygdala plays a role in storing those type of memories. Remember the cranial nerves. 1 is the olfactory, smell. So if your cranial nerve number 1 is damaged, you may not be able to smell things. 2 is optic, vision. So obviously that cranial nerve number 2 is going to innervate, which means connect to your eyes. And 10 is the vagus cranial nerve, and that's for the parasympathetic nervous system. So that is for the rest and digest. So if that is overactive, some people can actually faint because it makes them so relaxed. It takes away blood from like the brain, and it takes it to the rest and digest, moves it towards the digestive organ. What else? 7, CSF. Remember, if you're healthy, it is clear. It is full of glucose, salts. It's liquids. It has ions. It's floating. The brain basically floats in it. It's for protection. But those are all things that describe the cerebrospinal fluid. I already went over things. So things that can cross through: alcohol, glucose, oxygen. Those are 3 things that can easily pass through the BBB, or brain-blood barrier. Characteristics of left and right hemispheres. Remember, the left is good for like spoken and written language, logic, scientific reasoning, math skills, where the right side of the brain is more musical awareness, recognizing faces, artistic awareness. Those are the 2 left and right cerebral hemispheres. 10, association function of the brain. There's sensory function, there's motor function, and then there's association function. Sensory function, that brings signals from the peripheral nervous system, from your body to the brain, to allow it to know what's going on. The motor function is efferent neurons from the brain to the body that's going to create some sort of response. And the association functional area of the brain, that's basically the brain where memories are stored, where emotions, coming up, planning. That's all association. That's basically like interneurons. That's all the thinking involved. Those are associations. Or motor is neurons that are going to the peripheral nervous system to make some sort of response. Sensory is afferent neurons coming into the brain and spinal cord to bring sensory information to the brain. All right, number 11, Broca's-Wernicke's. Let's see, where is it? All right, so it's right here. Broca's area would be right about here. Wernicke's area is going to be right in this region right there. Remember Broca's? That's for speech production, for talking. Wernicke's back here, more posterior, and then like the temporal/parietal lobe. That's for speech comprehension, understanding speech in the back, producing speech in the front. This goes. Back to this, number 12, limbic system. The limbic system is important in storing memories and for emotions. That's what they call it, the emotional brain. So the hippocampus is very much involved in storing new memories. Some of you guys had hippocampal damage in your case study, and those people could remember old memories, but they couldn't form any new memories. And if you have your amygdala, I think one lady, she was fearless. She had no fear of anything because her amygdala was damaged. 13, RAS, reticular activation system. It's in the brainstem, medulla, and the pons, and that is, it keeps you conscious, it keeps you awake, and it helps to alert the cerebral cortex to awaken from sleep. That's basically its two things. It keeps you awake, and it arouses you from sleep. Functions of different lobes of the brain. All right, let's see here. What are we going to need? Remember, parietal lobe is mainly sensory. It contains the primary somatosensory cortex. Frontal lobe contains the precentral gyrus, which is the primary motor cortex. The temporal lobe, which is on the side of your cerebrum, that's auditory. Occipital lobe, which is in the very back, that is for visual stimulation, visual stimuli. Goes to the occipital lobe in the very back or posterior of the cerebrum. All right, what do we got now? Functions of the hypothalamus. Remember, it has a bunch of functions. It controls the pituitary gland, which is the master gland. It controls the thyroid gland and also the sex glands. It controls the autonomic nervous system. A lot of you guys put homeostasis. True, but what about homeostasis? Well, it controls body temperature, regulates body temperature. It controls hunger and thirst. Right, that's like 5. I can never remember the 6th one. I can't remember right now. Anyways, but mainly remember it controls the pituitary gland. So it's like the link between the brain, the nervous system, and the pituitary gland, the endocrine system. Cranial nerves, CNS or PNS. Cranial nerves are peripheral nervous system. Even though they branch off from the brain, they're not part of the brain or the spinal cord. They're part of the PNS, peripheral nervous system. Optic chiasm, remember that's on the bottom of the brain, the ventral surface where the optic tracts cross over. So some visual stimulation from the left eye can go to the right cerebral hemisphere. So obviously that has to do with the eyes, with vision. Sulcus/gyrus. Remember, a sulcus is a groove in the brain, where a gyrus is a bump or a hill. All right, 20. Why does the brain require so much blood? Because it can't store glucose. Your muscles can store glucose in the form of glycogen, but your brain can't. So it needs a constant supply of both glucose and oxygen, because those sodium-potassium pumps are constantly pumping out sodium, pumping in potassium. So that requires energy to do that. So the brain needs a constant supply of glucose and oxygen. 21, parts of the brain stem. Remember, that's the medulla. I'm going from inferior to superior, bottom to top. Medulla oblongata, pons, and the midbrain. The 3 parts of the brain stem. Let me get back up here. Where are we at? 22, pineal gland function. Pineal gland is that gland that's just posterior or behind the thalamus, and it secretes a hormone called melatonin, which induces sleep. So the pineal gland secretes melatonin, which puts you to sleep. 23, cerebral cortex. Remember, that's the outer layer of the cerebrum. The very, very outer layer, only like a few millimeters, thick. It's gray matter because it's not made of myelinated axons, it's made of cell bodies. That's why it looks gray and not white. Homunculus. See if I can find homunculus. Remember that one? I don't have a picture of him right now. That was the guy with the huge hands and a huge mouth and lips. Well, why does he have huge hands? Because that requires a more area of the cerebrum to control your hands, and also more area of the cerebrum to feel the sensations in your hands, because you do a lot of fine touch with your hands. So that's why the guy's hands are so big. So hands are big, lips are big, tongue is big. When you're talking, you need to do very precise movements with your mouth. It takes a lot of real estate in the cerebrum to work the hands and the mouth. Oh, where are we at here? Creates CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. That's the choroid plexus. Choroid plexus makes CSF. Cerebral cortex was it made of? I just did that one. All right, so 26 is a repeat. 27. Where's the pituitary gland? It's just inferior to the hypothalamus, just below the hypothalamus. That's where it's located. What is gustatory cortex? Gustatory is taste. And it's located partially, you're not going to know where it's located. Partially on the frontal lobe and partially what's called the insular lobe. But you won't need to know that. All right, breathing function of the medulla. Remember the medulla, it had a function of some reflexes like vomiting, swallowing, coughing, hiccup. Also controls the rhythm of your breathing, the in and the out. Remember the pons control the depth of the breathing, depth of inhalation. So that's the medulla prima. Okay, now let me go to the... here's the cerebrum. Let me go ahead and draw in some stuff. All right, central sulcus right here. Central sulcus, that's a groove. We'll go blue. Here's your primary motor cortex right here. Shaded in. Primary motor. Primary somatosensory. Right here. All right, so that's where all the sensations from the body, that's where they're going to connect right here to the brain. That's where part of the brain that receives sensations to the body like pain, touch, temperature. Primary motor, that's where you initiate all your motor movements in your body, your hands, legs, everything. All initiated. Starts right here in the primary motor cortex. Frontal lobe up here, kind of roughly draw it out. Contains the primary motor cortex. That's where your planning is involved, intelligence, personality, storing most of your memories up here in the front. So it's the frontal lobe. Parietal lobe is this color. Back in here, roughly like that, goes up to the central sulcus. This is where sensory information, this is where mostly sensory information arrives here in the parietal lobe. Got back here, you got the occipital lobe, which contains the primary visual cortex back here. So this is where the visual cortex, so information from the eyes, ends up coming back here in the occipital lobe. And then on the side here, we have the temporal lobe, which auditory cortex, hearing, some taste. So that's right here. Mostly, just know where it's at. This is where the auditory cortex is at. I think that's all you need to know. And once again, Broca's area is right around in here. Speech production. Wernicke's area is right around in there. It's a little bit further up, but I think that's close. That's speech comprehension. All right, and a couple more things. Here is the second largest part of the brain, the cerebellum. So the cerebrum is the largest. You can see it's much larger. Cerebellum is the second largest. All right, here's your sheep brain. First thing I always do, find the corpus callosum. Here it is right here, this white matter, corpus callosum. Then go directly down or inferior. Boom, you got your thalamus. Hypo means below, so just below the thalamus, you're going to have the hypothalamus. I highly doubt you're going to, here's your pineal gland, or that secretes melatonin, makes you go to sleep. Superior colliculi, superior and inferior colliculi is part of the midbrain. So this is the midbrain right here. It's not really labeled, just called the superior colliculi. And then we're moving, it's called rostrally, down towards the spinal cord. Here's your pons. Of course, cerebellum, here's the arbor vitae, tree of life, inside it. medulla oblongata, and then it goes down to the spinal cord. All right, so then right here, the hypothalamus, if the pineal gland was still attached, it would be right here. Pineal gland, right there, because that's thalamus, hypothalamus, and remember the hypothalamus controls the pineal gland. All right, so here's the pictures that we went over in class. I don't know what day it was, but those of you guys who were watching, we saw these 3 pictures. Because I remember on our quiz we had this, and almost everybody said, oh, it's a basal ganglia. Well, really, here's the basal ganglia right here. You can kind of see it's the ventricles right here. Obviously, on the test, it's not going to say ventricles of the brain. On this one, it's not going to say the limbic system. That's not going to be there. That'd be too easy. So it's going to say like, hey, identify what the group of structures is called. So don't, and you get a point for identifying and a point for, one of its functions. So you can't like zoom in, like here. So one of these, I think this exact picture is on the test. So you can't say, oh, this structure is the amygdala and the head of the caudate nucleus and the lentiform nucleus and the body of the caudate nucleus. Oh, and the thalamus. You can't just, copy what's already given to you. What you need to say is these group of structures together form the basal ganglia. Boom. Now you'll get a point. But look, see how they look so similar. I mean, even, the amygdala is here and it's here. Well, how do I know? Just look, because this is called the fornix, like the tail of the amygdala and the hippocampus. This fornix is very skinny. Or in this, the caudate nucleus is much thicker. And then it gets skinnier here. But this is actually the fornix. But see, this is much thicker. This only looks thick because it's got the thalamus. Look for these little skinny tails, and that's going to be the limbic. Or if it's much thicker throughout most of it, that's the basal ganglia. So the basal ganglia, remember, their main thing is that they initiate and terminate skeletal movements. So people that have damage here, sometimes it'll lead to what's called Parkinson's disease, where you get uncontrolled muscle movements, you get tremors. So your body's like shaking or kind of convulsing, and you don't want it to. There's Huntington's disease, where you're unable to move. It's like you're frozen. You're almost paralyzed. You try to start a movement, you want to start it, but it won't. You just cannot start it. And that's Huntington's disease. Remember the limbic system? Very important. That's one up here. It's got the little skinnier little tails. Important in forming new memories. And remember also the amygdala is very important in emotions, especially like fear, anger, rage. Now here we got the ventricles. So if you're going to do this one, this might be a written question, I don't remember. This is blue because it contains a fluid. It contains cerebrospinal fluid. And also remember, it contains the choroid plexus, those structures that help to produce and circulate the cerebrospinal fluid. All right, so ventricles, blue, pools of CSF, basal ganglia, it's thicker. And then we got the limbic system. Memories on top, initiating, terminating skeletal movements in the middle, stores cerebrospinal fluid at the bottom. All right, I hope that helped, and I'll see you guys on Monday.